Yes, I welcome you back in our today's offline video lecture of class 12 information practices, and the today's topic is database constraints. This topic is presented to you by Ankur Pandita, teacher, BHSS Drugmulla. Now we will start with what is a constraint. Integrity constraints are the rules in real life which are to be imposed on the data. So the rules imposed on the data are known as constraints. Besides the cell name, cell length, cell data type, there are other parameters, that is other data constraints that can be passed to the DBA, that is database administrator, at cell creation time. These data constraints are connected to a cell by the database administrator as a flag. Whenever a user attempts to load a cell within database administrator will check the data being loaded into the cell against the data constraint defined at the cell creation time. If the data being loaded fails to satisfy any of the data constraint checks fired by the DBA will not load the data in the cell and reject the entered record and will flash an error message. So, constraints, database constraints are the rules applied by the database administration to the data so that only relevant data is entered in a cell. Whenever a user enters the data which does not satisfy the rules created by the data administrator, the entered record is rejected and an error message is flashed. So, what are the types of database constraints? First type is not null constraint. When a column name is defined as not null, then that column becomes a mandatory column. So when database administrators defines a particular column as not null constraint, then it becomes a mandatory column, and hence user has to necessarily mandatorily you write that column. It implies that the user is enforced to write data into the column. So when a column becomes mandatory by applying not null constraint, the user is enforced to enter data into that column. Principles of null value. Setting the null value is appropriate when the actual value is unknown or a value would not be meaningful. A null value would not be equivalent to a value or zero. A null value would evaluate to null in any expression. Create table is a syntax through which we can create table. Roll number varchar, that is roll number, you create a column that is known as roll number. Varchar is a data type, and you then apply the constraint not null. That roll number becomes a then mandatory column and which user is enforced to enter data. And the second data constraint is unique key constraint. The purpose of unique key is to ensure that information in the column for each record is unique. So by enforcing unique key constraint, the database administrator, that is DBA, ensures that information in the column for each record is unique. Unique key as a column constraint. Create table. When you create is a syntax, is a command through which we can create a table. The roll number is the name of the column. Varchar is a data type. Unique. We assign the unique constraint to the roll number column. So it becomes the information which you enters has to be unique. So in a class or in an institute, the roll number is different for any session. You can't enter the same number to different students. So unique key constraint is used for the purpose when you have to make the information in the column unique. Students, third is check constraint. It is used when we need to enforce integrity rules that can be evaluated based on a logical expression. When the database administrator enforce integrity rules according to a logical expression, then it can be called a check constraint. Let us see its syntax. Create table. So you create a table, name the student, and in that table you create a column that is roll number. Varchar is the data type. Check roll number like C%. That is, you enforced a logical expression on it, and it becomes this column becomes a check constraint. That is, when we evaluate something based on a logical expression, this constraint is known as check constraint. And fourth is foreign key constraint. Foreign key represents relationship between tables. As I have already told in various types of keys, that foreign keys represent relationship between tables. A foreign key is a column or group of columns whose values are derived from the primary key of the same or some other table. The existence of a foreign key implies that the table within the foreign key is related to the primary key table from which the foreign key is derived. By applying foreign key, the foreign key directly implies within the table or within the primary key table from which the foreign key is derived. A foreign key must have a corresponding primary key value in the primary key table to have a meaning. So foreign key reference constraint rejects an insert or update of a value if the corresponding value does not currently exist in primary key table. So database administrator through this foreign key constraint rejects any insert or update values if the corresponding value does not exist in primary key table. Similarly, it rejects a delete if we do not invalidate a reference constant. It must reference a primary key or unique column in a primary key table with reference the primary key of the primary table if no column or group of columns is specified by the constraint. So foreign key constraint is applied to a column by the database administrator to make it reference with the primary key table. If the key is not present in the primary key table, then that is rejected. Students, this is it for today's topic of database constraints and its types. In constraints, we studied that constraint is the rules applied to the data by the database administrator. We also studied 4 types of constraints. That is, first we studied not null constraint, second unique key constraint, third is check constraint, fourth is foreign key constraint. Students, let us revise this topic. We will come with more and more topics to cover your syllabus and also give you a deep understanding of your subject. Students, stay at home, stay safe, stay healthy.